Welcome back to the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we love to talk about the things that are weighing on our minds for 200 episodes. Yay! My name is Don. I'm a big chubby guy living here in sunny Hollywood, and today I am a liquored up happy boy.
Oh my God.
I've got my glass of Prosecco as we raise a toast to
Such a
our
lightweight.
special anniversary. Don't you judge me.
Yeah, he's coming up on 4 ounces of Prosecco.
4 very strong ounces, I'll have you know.
Hi, I'm Dan Oliverio, author, public speaker, and chubby chaser, and have a remarkable tolerance for Prosecco. I can tolerate it all the way to not drinking it at all. And yeah, I just do 200.
200.
I'm Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub, and I'm a, excited 200 boy. It's so weird to think about, like, when we were first sitting in this room discussing this podcast conception.
It was exactly where we are now.
And I never thought there would be 200 episodes.
I didn't.
You were praying there wouldn't be.
Hi, my name is Michael Willer. I'm a chubby chaser, and it's wild. It's definitely wild to think that we've done so many of these for over 4.5. We're coming up on 5 years now.
Yeah.
It will be coming up on 5.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is, like, you start doing these in a vacuum, and before they go out into the world, you don't know how that's going to be received. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of doing this many of them was unthinkable only because we didn't have that feedback yet. Like, we didn't have,
like, we were kind
listeners.
of thinking like maybe 50 or 60 people would tune in early on.
like maybe a couple casual, listeners with a couple dedicated fans. And it's really just been an incredible journey. But let's do our housekeeping before we get into the mushy stuff. Raising a glass to you, the listener, the listener just out there driving their car eternally.
Hopefully not having champagne along with us.
We've made the joke before, but literally there is no show without an audience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for making us part of your week for the past 5 years.
Yeah, very much appreciate it. And also to our patrons on Patreon who actually monetarily support the show. We've been working with a new editor that's been working out great. Mm-hmm. That's always been the goal, is for us to be able to the people in the room to be able to focus on recording the episodes and to be able to, like, have the level of production that we can, like, pay an editor, support their career. And so we just really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And also raising a donut, because we have champagne and donuts, because we're classy like that.
We don't have champagne, we have Prosecco.
It's champagne. They don't know.
This is the beer of champagne, Dan. What's wrong with you?
Thank you, as always, to Bearskin and Big Fig for supporting us by being associated with us.
For not being ashamed to walk down the street with us in public.
That's always the goal.
One of the first things, I think, very early on was joking about a promo code for the podcast.
Promo
Code FAT. But now we're promo code Big Fat Gay Pod. And it's exciting. It's going to be 200 more promos. I'm manifesting it. You feel it, listener. You feel it. That darkness, the dark energy you feel.
That's Trevor. That's Trevor, that darkness.
It's me manifesting.
Have we debuted your Infinifat voice on the actual episode?
I don't know that we have.
I know we've done it for behind the scenes.
Yeah. Silence. And your lights flicker and maybe some glass cracks. No, it's
ass cracks.
No, glass. No,
we've already been celebrating, in case you can't tell. All right. Well, we have a very special episode planned, and I can't wait any longer. Let's dive into it. We have been taking, over the past few weeks and months, listener write-ins of stories of experiences they've had, but also voice messages. People have actually contributed their own voices literally to the show, and we can't wait to share them with you.
Yes, and
make it sound like Ariel and
as an extra fun topper, most of us haven't heard the recorded messages yet either.
So we're gonna react live.
So in episode 1 of the podcast, episode 1, Too Fat to Play the Blob, we talked about David Harbour premiering in the trailer for Black Widow as Red Guardian. But the main topic of the episode really was the law from 2019 in Washington State, where obesity was recognized as a disabled class. And so it provided protections for people, but we're also kind of going into like, how do we feel about that? Because it's protections, but at what cost?
It's also stigmatizing because, like, you're fat, you're disabled.
Yeah.
And Washington was the second state. Michigan was the first, I think 1978, I want to say.
From Michigan.
Michigan. But we have a message from Tigress Osborne guest of the pod. She was on episode 63, which was celebrating Fat Liberation Month as a guest. And she's giving us an update on the Campaigns for Size Freedom, which is NAFA's fight to get more protections for fat people in various states. So I'm very excited to hear this.
I'm Tigress Osborne. I'm the executive director of NAFA, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. And I've been listening to the Big Fat Gay podcast since episode 63, when the boys invited me on to talk about Fat Liberation Month. But what I actually want to talk to you about today, as they celebrate their 200th episode extravaganza, is something they talked about in the very first episode, which is size freedom laws. What they were talking about was the then recent Supreme Court decision in the state of Washington that classified obesity as protected under disability rights laws. Now, that can be complicated, but it is one way of getting protections. At NAFA, we are co-founders of the Campaign for Size Freedom, and the way that we work towards getting protections is by simply having height and weight added to the protected classes under existing human rights or civil rights laws in states and cities across the country, with the ultimate goal of doing that at the federal level. The most exciting thing that's happened since the boys recorded that episode is that New York City became the most recent place to pass a law banning height and weight discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodation, which means that over 20 million people of all sizes are now protected from size discrimination under the law. We're also working on laws in Massachusetts, New York at the state level, New Jersey, Vermont. We had a success last year with helping support an anti-bullying law in Colorado that added height and weight to their anti-bullying regulations in that state. And we've had a bill introduced in Alabama recently. So there's lots being done and lots more local organizers across the country coming together. We expect to see lots of new bills in 2025, and we can't wait to be there with the Big Fat Gay podcast crew as they discuss all those new developments in their next 100 episodes. Congratulations, guys.
Oh,
yay.
That's so sweet.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Hold on.
You know, I'll be honest, when we started this podcast, I wasn't prepared for the amount of politics that would be involved in being fat. Like, I wasn't prepped for that.
I don't think many fat people
The
are.
original pitch for the show was that Don and I were kind of the newbies to the activism space, and that Dan and Trevor were the experienced two.
The grizzled old veteran.
Yeah.
I'll tell you in my day.
But it's incredible to hear like how much has come up in the last, I don't know, almost 5 years.
Yeah.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with Tigress, like, she is so good at explaining how these things affect us, what they do in a concise, clear way. She is a brilliant communicator on that front.
Yeah. It's
So good to have her on our side.
So amazing to hear all of those advancements. And of course, our role in all of this is to amplify that and to be able to say, like, here are the updates. Here's what's happening. Here's where it's happening. If you happen to live there, you can support these things. We did that for the New York bill. Anyway, super, super exciting.
Yeah.
Very, very cool to have NAFA contributing Tigress's voice. So thank you. So I don't know if you remember all the way back in episode 50. I sure don't. Back in 2021, we invited artist and illustrator and friend of the podcast, Bats Langley, on to discuss all things art. And Bats shared some updates with us regarding various projects, including Gus, his sort of famed artistic
Persona,
yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. And so we can take a listen to Bats.
This is Bats Langley, and I want to wish the Big Fat Gay podcast a happy 200th episode. It's hard to believe I was on episode 50. It feels so long ago, but lots of stuff has happened since then. A new Groggle Halloween book and my illustrating of Jackie O and Jackie and the Book She Loved just came out. My Gus work has grown into this awesome series of paintings, drawings, and sculpture, and recently I showed my biggest Gus at the Barrison Street Festival in San Francisco. I've also had the awesome opportunity to create a body of work depicting commissioned portraits of fat, queer, and LGBTQ plus people. I have some commission spots left for this holiday and into the new year if anyone is interested in one. Thank you guys again for all you do. I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me and said they heard my interview on your podcast and how much they love your podcast. You have been so helpful in highlighting people in the queer, fat, gay community, and I thank you. And I can't wait to hear 200 plus more episodes. Take care.
Yay.
For those of you who missed Bat's episode, he is charming.
Absolutely.
It's such a fun little episode, and he's a great interview.
We don't do a whole lot of interviews, but everyone we can definitely highly recommend, especially that one. I also Trevor and Dan hire commissioned Bats to do their Christmas cards, their holiday cards every year. And we haven't seen this year's, obviously, but the last year's card I think is still on our fridge because it is such a delightful.
It's really cute.
Which one was that?
It was the Rat King.
Yeah,
the Rat King.
The Rat King Christmas.
So it's to be clearer. It's taken inspiration from the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
And so there is, of course, a Rat King in the Nutcracker. I think it's originally a Mouse King in German. But anyway, it's a Rat King now. And I think it's Trevor as the Rat King and me as the Nutcracker.
Well, actually, and the callback is that Trevor had christened us. I think our first holiday episode is the Rat King Christmas.
Yeah. Christmas 2020 was definitely a Rat King Christmas. No, and the idea from the Nutcracker came from Bats' husband. And he's
right.
like, what about the Nutcracker? I'm like, oh yeah, I can be the Rat King. He's like, oh, well, I was thinking maybe it's Clara and you'd be Clara and Dan would be the Nutcracker. But I guess that works too.
I think the Rat King is so much more appropriate.
Yeah. And if you want a little preview of that, it is Trevor's profile picture on Instagram.
It is.
Yeah, so if you find him on there, you can see at least the Rat King portion.
Yeah. And I mean, if you don't already follow Bats on Instagram, he regularly does commissions throughout the season. So if you don't want to do something for Christmas, maybe you have a loved one or your partner or something. I mean, that was one of our gift guide items last year was a Bats Langley commission. And he does beautiful portraits of couples, of families, of pets, or just original pieces. He has a client who I think has done these kind of fairy witch women and has wanted one for every season.
Oh,
one of the things that I've loved about doing the show is we have a really creative listener base. And so we occasionally get in a few different letters a month, a year from different people who've created things that want to bring some attention to it, from movies to books to manga. So here's our first letter of the day. My name is Logan Chrysler Dotard. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm a 60-year-old gay Canadian Métis manga artist, former underground cartoonist, and writer originally from Powell River, British Columbia, now residing in Tumwater, Washington. I run a solo small anime studio and advertising firm called Yanagwa Entertainment Limited, for which I'm proud of my latest two creations, a Bishoujo Big Bear Romance, a meeting in West Central Park, that's its name, a story about a former television network producer who finds love with a younger artist of color in the West Side Bohemians of Olympia, Washington state capital. The other is A Lonely Man's Christmas No More, my first holiday gay bear romance story about the new relationship between a struggling expat photographer and his new chub daddy bear Honey, an ex-U.S. Air Force colonel and Vietnam vet who meet at a Kitsap County mall where the older man is a temporary Santa. My love and respect for fat men started strangely enough in all places, New York City, during a Pride festival back in the day, where I was introduced to girth and mirth at the time I was breaking out of my garage, as I was combining my love of classic and custom hot rod iron with sketches of assorted daddy bears and big men. This allowed me to break out and chase my love and respect for fat people, for I feel they were my greatest fans and supporters. I'll never forget their admiration, and they will forever be in my heart for the kindness and honesty. Two, who sadly passed away, were one of my 4 best friends and supporters of me pursuing my goals, and offered the best of good, honest encouragement and friendship. I'll always love them for it. So in beloved memories of Jacques T. Garon, Randy Theobald, Michael Lee Strange, and my best chub pals, Scott, Jeff, and Eddie, I'm going to fight nail and tong for my fat brothers and wahinis, and will stand up for them 100%, end of story. And so here's my chubs and their forever partners, a meeting in West Central Park's Jerry Livingston and Kyle Lamont Cartier, and former Colonel Stanley Pappy McCarran and his Canadian Shutterbug honey, Nova Scotian Marcus Rand. Pappy McCarran and Marcus Rand from A Lonely Man's Christmas No More. A joyful thought for you and your listeners and daddy bears and big men out there.
I happen to know someone who is going to love these books.
Yeah.
So, it's very exciting.
Yeah, so the artist's name again is Logan Chrysler Dotard, D''OTARD. go out, look for those books.
Yeah. He also added at the end that he'll be at a book signing for A Lonely Man's Christmas in Port Townsend, Washington, Colna McCarran's hometown, and he'll be selling copies at Midwest Bear Fest this year.
And we're trying to do, I think we have a bit of an initiative to start highlighting more artists in the community that are looking to be able to amplify their voices. And so we've made a point to say like, oh, like maybe we can include some people in the tip this week or whatever. And this is sort of the start of that place too, is to be able to say like, hey, here's someone in the community who's doing this great thing.
So don't be afraid to reach out. We want to know your art. Like this is why we're here. We want to expand our community and help us find each other.
So I was excited that we got a message from Mycroft, who is a longtime listener and supporter of the podcast. I mean,
Big
shares
supporter.
every week in their Instagram stories and then also in their newsletter-ish roundup of fat stuff going on online and in activist spaces. Westminster Flabby.
Yes. It's such a good name.
Cute.
Yeah. It's such a good name.
So I was thrilled and touched to get this message, which I haven't heard yet, but I'm excited to listen just because they have always supported us so much and gone above and beyond in sharing everything we do.
Happy 200th episode. So I'm not exactly your target or primary audience. I'm an AFAB, assigned female birth non-binary trans person. But I'm fat attracted and queer and a fat liberationist. And finding a podcast about fat attraction and fat lib has changed me and my life for the better. There's still so little community at that intersection. Your pod has been validating, therapeutic, educational, inspiring, and so much more. You've helped me in my love life, my advocacy, and elsewhere. One of the biggest and best things you've done is help me finally find my first fat-attracted friend. I'm his first FA friend, too.
Oh my God. That's okay. So I didn't know
that's
that.
awesome.
That's amazing. So part of the charm for this for us is that we haven't heard most of these yet. We kind of intentionally went in not having listened to them because we wanted to, and that is like, so I remember like early days of the podcast, you know, we're all kind of like actively sharing on Facebook and trying to kind of, you know, like boost the signal as it were. And Mycroft was one of the first early adopters of like sharing what we were putting out there and like actively engaging, liking our posts. And it just stuck with me this entire time, even until recently, just like how dedicated of a supporter of the show they've been. And it's so amazing to think back that we've had that kind of a relationship for so long. And just thank you.
And Mycroft also becomes our first example of what we really hoped our show would do, which would be to build bridges between people in our community who don't traditionally talk.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
and we've been talking in the past about how many chasers and fat attracted people just don't see a reason to talk with each other. There's plenty of reasons.
And it doesn't just have to be, oh, look how hot that one is. Like it can, you know, we can have real discussions.
No. Oh, and I think also it's important, you know, we always talk about this in chasers and just fat attracted people who go through different things than their fat partners. And it just something where it's not necessarily fair sometimes to burden their fat partner with like, I'm dealing with this kind of fat phobia thing and I need someone to talk with about it, but I don't necessarily want to be talking to, you know, my fat partner who goes through so much more and to just be able to like work through things or be like, I want to help my partner this way, but I don't know how. And
it's the pairing of that unique shared experience where like you and your chaser friend, your fat attracted friend can have that commonality that you wouldn't necessarily find in your everyday average garden variety friend. And to be able to like share about those things and talk about them openly is really refreshing.
I feel like our sexuality is such a big part of ourselves, but as chubs and chasers, we're often taught like people aren't interested in talking about it with us, so we don't. It's healthy to talk about these
exactly,
things,
or that you're told as a fat person you don't have a sexuality, or you're told as a chaser that your sexuality is sick.
Yeah. And so being able to find ways out of those tropes and have like real conversations about this stuff, really, really valuable. And it's great that Mycroft has been able to find that for themselves.
And if there's one lesson I hope that all of you take from the Big Fat Gay podcast is that fat guys, you do have a sexuality. And chaser boys, you are not sick. What's next, Dan?
Well, speaking of longtime listeners, we got this wonderful email and it goes like this. I've said it before in a few ways, but to summarize and reemphasize, Guess I'd like to share that you folks are my only community, really. I live on an island, literally. It's a small population compared to the big area like, Los Angeles or Las Vegas. Even going to large urban center like Honolulu involves a 3-hour transit and $150 via plane ride.
Wow.
Quaint as that sounds, I still have a rainbow sticker on my car and take a rainbow beach towel to my weekly swims. Us country mice can't afford to be post-gay. Back before social media, over 10 years ago, I co-counseled a weekly teen LGBTQ drop-in talk group. So I can attest to the idea that dedicating 4+ hours must be the minimum you put in for research, recording, editing, all these weekly episodes is quite a commitment. What you four do each week means a lot to so many of us. One of the defining features of the Big Fat Gay podcast is the inclusion of chaser voices. I can't think of any other forum where chasers have an equal voice, not just as a please let us participate too vibe. Mahalo nui loa.
Oh.
This is so, because we develop relationships with a lot of, like a lot of listeners, I think, are just like listeners every week. And eventually we might hear like, oh my God, like you've listened to all the episodes. It's amazing. But some people we've heard from regularly, like we'll have, mailbags, we'll have write-ins for the Valentine's episodes. And this is one of those people. And it's so wonderful to kind of have those check-ins, because eventually you start to feel like there is a weird kind of like parasocial relationship element to it. But we also got to meet him at Bigger Vegas a couple years ago.
He gave us cookies.
He gave us
really good cookies.
Really, really good cookies.
They were so good, in fact, that I never got one.
Didn't you?
I don't think I did.
No, but I even ordered some.
They disappeared before I got one.
Oh no!
So maybe next Bigger Vegas.
You were COVID blocked because you left early.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what happened?
I had your cookies, and there was no way to get them to you.
Oh, I see. Well, blame COVID for
Don
that
fell
one.
on that cookie sword.
I threw myself on those chocolate chips for you,
It's
mister.
very noble.
It was very messy. There was chocolate everywhere.
But he brought me a couple like T-shirts that it's just like really heartwarming experiences that we didn't expect going into this. Like,
No, we didn't do it for the loot.
No.
Who expected swag?
I also got a little lovely like sumo wrestler centaur
Oh,
I
yeah.
love
squeaky
that
toy that's
sumo
on my
wrestler
vanity when I get to see it every day.
And it's a squeaky toy,
Yeah.
And it made it into our behind the scenes around that time too.
Yeah.
It was one of our earlier ones. Also, hopefully be able to like meet up again. I don't know if he's coming to Bigger Vegas next year, but
He actually reached out and said he is.
Yay! Awesome.
and we'll be there hopefully with a live show.
Yeah, we're definitely planning on doing another live episode because that was just that was so much fun.
Yeah.
So in continuing on our theme of like blasts from the past, we have a voice message from Chris Rosa, who we talked to in episode 40 back in 2020. Oh, remember that? Remember November 2020.
How dare you?
Chris is an entertainment journalist who writes for some very elite magazines. So we had him on the show to talk about the experience of being a fat person in high fashion magazines and writing columns and writing commentary and just sort of the intersection of that. So that's what the interview was about. And so we reached out to him to see like what's been happening since.
Hey guys, I can't believe it's been 4 years since I was a guest on my Big Fat Gay podcast. That episode was so much fun to record. And, the past 4 years have really flown by, and, taking a second to look back at them, I do see an evolution for myself personally when it comes to body positivity, fat acceptance, further destigmatizing the word fat for myself and my friends and the world and culture around me. When I was a guest in 2020, I was plugged into that frequency, but I think I was in the early stages of being in that frequency. I still think I did recoil a little bit subconsciously at the word fat. I almost was speaking the beliefs that I wanted to hold true into existence.
Oh, that's great.
Even if I didn't necessarily wholeheartedly believe them myself. And while I don't think I am fully realized yet, because, I've been fat my whole life, I've only recently started radically accepting my body or even attempting to reach body neutrality. So I have decades and decades of body shaming and really toxic messages to untangle. But I do think the past 4 years have further been, an exploration and untangling those mindsets. Even as something as simple as I finally booked Bigger Vegas for next year.
Yay!
I, for whatever reason, was so apprehensive or scared or nervous to pull the trigger on that vacation. And a friend convinced me to do it. And I did it on a whim. And the next day I woke up expecting to have buyer's remorse, but I really was excited.
Oh, good.
And still am excited and kind of have a little bit of a metaphorical countdown right now because I think it's going to be great. And I think that a move like that further just shows the growth I've had in fully embodying and accepting intrinsically maybe the things I was preaching out loud 4 years ago, which is exciting. And, little things, have changed for me. I no longer am ashamed or embarrassed to ask friends to slow down if they're walking too fast or to request an aisle seat at the movie theater or to be honest about things that I might have lied about to make my being fat palatable and comfortable for other people. Things like friends asking me why I'm not getting concert merchandise when I go to a show. I used to say things like, I don't really like anything. Now I'll say something like, that doesn't come in my size. These shirts don't come in my size.
Awesome.
And I don't know, let them sit with that and realize that the world doesn't look and operate the same way for me as it does for them.
That's amazing.
And I think just those little acts of standing up for yourself, standing in your truth and your reality to your community, just like better emboldens and empowers you. And I think, the past 4 years have really been, I've been laying the groundwork in that in a lot of ways. And it's podcasts like Big Fat Gay Podcasts. It's communities I found on Bigger City and in New York City that have just led me to not have a number on the scale in mind when I think about my happiness. And that's really freeing. Again, I'm not 100% there. I have my good days and bad days like we all do. But I think I can proudly say the past 4 years, I have evolved further into, really reaching a place of genuine body acceptance, neutrality. And then I'm optimistic that will become positivity. And it's a lot of the work that you guys are doing on this podcast that's contributed to that. So I thank you very much. And see you guys in Vegas next year. I'll be there dancing my ass off.
I'm verklempt. That
me
was
too.
a lovely one.
That's so I've had a couple lunches with Chris and we've been able to just like sit down and talk over the years. And this just feels like such a like a validating thing to hear.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Like even just that simple example of like, they don't have my size. Like that's.
Yeah. And not having to make up a story about it.
Yeah. Like
That's so
that
great.
kind of being able to live authentically.
I feel like a lot of people who haven't lived at large sizes and been forced to live in this silence don't understand how big a step that is. Yeah. So, Chris, let me just take a sec as one big guy to another to acknowledge that is a big ass step and good on you.
Yeah.
Well, and the amount of good it does, because those friends, you're not doing them any favors by telling them that you don't like the design of the merchandise.
Yeah.
That when you actually say what's so for you, that's what moves the needle. It's that sort of coming out as a fat person, so to speak, that really moves the needle with friends and family where they go, oh, I never thought of that.
Yep.
And I think just because when you share that with a friend, it lands with them, they process it, and they might be able to speak up for some event with, they're getting merch for it and like, oh, well, that my friend can't get merch when we go to concerts in their size, let's look at getting bigger sizes, or can we get something else that isn't necessarily just a t-shirt?
Yeah. And it is completely different. If I go up to a merchant and I say, oh, does this come in 5X? Rather than Trevor saying, does this come in 5X? It lands differently.
Yeah. 100%.
Bigger Vegas. I feel like, okay, so making the call now, everybody convene in Bigger Vegas next year. That's going to be so much fun. I can't wait. So next up, we had listener Brian writing in from, Cleveland, Oklahoma. I didn't realize there was a Cleveland in Oklahoma. Well, anyway.
I think it's like The Simpsons. Every town has it. Every state has a Cleveland.
Everybody has a Cleveland. Okay. Brian writes, "Hello, Big Fat Gay Pod team. I'm responding to your Facebook post requesting feedback about how the podcast has impacted our lives. First, it has helped me feel more confident and more normal by helping me see I'm part of a large, no pun intended, community. Second, on a more practical level, I flew this summer with a second seat for the first time ever.
Oh,
yay.
After years of miserable, beyond cramped air travel.
Yeah.
What a difference that made.
God, yes.
Yeah. I feel like I can travel routinely again, even though my body is too large and too tall for a single airplane seat. Man-spreading has never felt so good. I'm booking another trip to visit the Pacific Northwest with my boyfriend in December.
Oh, good.
I will be booking a second seat for myself again. In addition to making the experience more comfortable, the extra seat also ensures he and I will be alone together in our little space on the plane. Yeah, this is Michael here. Personally, I can absolutely attest to the joy of that particular feeling.
It's really like having a suite, isn't it?
It's your own little space. Yeah, absolutely. I fully get the benefit of traveling with my partner, Michael, and having that middle seat buffer because we both get it. Back to the letter. Finally, the podcast is helping keep me connected to our community since exiting the dating apps earlier this year. I work 2 jobs and commute 80 miles daily for work in Tulsa while living in a rural small town, Oklahoma. So there's not much opportunity for in-person socializing at this stage in life. The podcast helps me feel connected to other people like me. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Keep up the great and important work, Brian.
Huzzah.
Yeah, I feel like we hear regularly from people who drive huge amounts every day. It's like, I look forward to the podcast every Wednesday because it helps me get through my drive.
Well, people in LA do that too. It's just that we travel 4 miles.
Yeah. And it still takes 80 minutes.
It takes 80 minutes. Yeah.
I don't need podcasts. The sound of my own swearing keeps me going.
I really hope that this ages well in terms of Southwest keeping their second seat policy.
Yeah,
that's still kind of up in the air at the moment of this recording. But
for people who don't know, Southwest is revamping their ticketing system, which may or may not allow for booking a second seat as easily.
Yeah, historically, they've had a fantastic, or at least recent history, semi-recent history. They have a fantastic second seat policy. We hope it sticks around.
If you haven't already, I think we touched on this a couple episodes ago, but NAFA has a petition for Southwest to keep their second seat policy, to keep things accessible with their new assigned seating policy.
Yeah.
You can find out more information about what's been going on with this and get updates and sign the petition at nafa.org/Southwest.
Yes. And I remember filling that out, but definitely go check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
There's still time. All right. We have a couple more messages to play. I am going to just do these in random order and we'll just sort of experience what they are. All right.
So cavalier.
Hey guys, it's David. Congratulations on 200 episodes. I remember the good old days, back when Fat Watch was Lizzo Watch, back when Michael said look out instead of watch out, back before the utterance of the term fold fucking changed all of our lives forever.
Yes.
I wasn't sure the best way to describe how the podcast has changed my life, because truly I have to be on the short list of people who have been most impacted by it. I think I thought of a good one, though. I read Dan's book for the first time in 2019. I started to read it again recently, and I found that I had highlighted a couple of tough questions on my first read. What is it like to be attracted to a characteristic that is taboo? How do you deal with being desired for a characteristic that you actively dislike about yourself? How does a person deal with family, friends, even a whole society that thinks that his body is wrong, or that the desire for such a body is wrong? I had highlighted these questions, so evidently they were resonant for me back then. Here was a reminder of my struggles with body image. Here was a reminder that I used to feel that anyone who was attracted to me must have something wrong with them. But also, 5 years later, on the plane to Bigger Bash, where I met all of you, I read back through these questions and thought to myself, I don't think about these problems at all anymore.
Oh, wow.
I love my body more than ever. I've found community with people who get me, to whom I don't have to explain myself. And I'm comfortable letting guys like me for what I look like, not in spite of what I look like. Excellent. I'm completely different now. I used to think that I was so fat that I would be alone forever. Compared to forever, changing all of this about myself in less than 5 years feels like it happened so fast. My sexting game is way better than it was when I wrote into Valentine's Day 2022, episode 89.5, asking, does anyone really find my fupa attractive? I'm having way better sex now than I was when I wrote in about my terrible hookup with a closeted guy in episode 142, where he did a line of cocaine behind my back. I was like,
I remember that.
Yep.
You talked in episode 1 about Southwest Airlines customer size policy, and that's how it's been affordable for me to date multiple guys long distance and to meet you all at Bigger Bash. Michael even interviewed me at his kitchen table for episode 194, where I pissed off his friend Bobby. Sorry, Bobby. So congratulations on 200. You've reached my weight in kilograms, so here's to 240 more, where you'll be at my weight in pounds.
That's awesome. Can I just say I love that metric?
Thanks for writing in on that. Like this is the kind of message that this is why we do the podcast.
That's great.
You know?
What a clear, like, what an incredibly clear way to define two eras in your life as well. Like because frankly, this podcast wouldn't exist if Dan hadn't written that book in the first place. Because when Don asked me, hey, this feels like a missing area in the world of podcasting. And I was like, well, I have this friend who talks about this. Like, what a way to tie all of that together. That's amazing.
That's so true. Yeah.
All right. Let's hear from... well, this is, by the way, this is the Bobby that... so this feels well.
And now to Bobby for rebuttal.
I'm not trying to stoke the flames of this budding rivalry.
This is where Bobby calls him out. This asshole I met in freaking Michael's kitchen.
My name is Bobby, and I'm from San Francisco, and I'm a huge fan of the podcast. Prior to the podcast, I was definitely someone who felt my own fatness was some kind of personal failing. And that despite my efforts, I simply couldn't be not fat. Although I acknowledge that I did refuse to get bariatric surgery for it, despite the constant recommendations from doctors, even for presenting problems that didn't seem to actually be related to my weight. But I digress. So because of this failing of mine, I worked so hard to become good at other areas of my life in the hopes that I could be seen as, well, Bobby may be fat, but he's insert positive attribute here. However, as I started to move through my life goals, I came to realize that no matter who I was or what I did, I would always be fat first. When I was in residency after medical school, my program director had the talk with me.
Oh my God.
Where he explained that I was really good at my job, but people were worried about my health. They were also bothered that my clothes weren't as tailored to my body as other people's, since because of my size, I had to sort of make do with whatever I could find on the internet. So in my evaluation, I was dinged for professionalism.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ.
For someone who takes great pride in what he does, that hit me hard. And I remember holding back the angry and disappointed tears I could feel welling up. With my response being so tempered, the program director seemed relieved as he told me, I knew you'd be able to take this feedback in stride.
Oh my God.
Fast forward to when I discovered the Big Fat Gay podcast. Finally, people were talking about my world in a way that was not disparaging, and in a way that was relatable, and most important of all, in a way that was empowering. You guys introduced me to writers like Aubrey Gordon and Lindy West, and from there I also found poets like Rachel Wiley and Blythe Baird. Blythe Baird has a poem that has the line, as a child, fat was the first word people used to describe me, which didn't offend me until I found out it was supposed to. So thank you, Big Fat Gay Podcast, for helping me take the offense out of the word fat and for helping me learn to demand the respect we all deserve. So now whenever people want to give me the talk, I finally have the words to talk back.
Ooh.
That's fantastic.
That's
Oh
amazing.
my God. I'm going to be like in tears by the end of these.
Bobby. Bobby and I are great friends. And I just want to add to this that the work that he does as a psychiatrist is amazing. Like he works with troubled kids, in particular, like youths who need, need a lot of help. And the way that, like, just the idea that you could ding somebody like him and the work that he's doing for quote unquote being unprofessionally presenting, like it's maddening.
Yeah.
Like,
And that ridiculous idea that, well, being fat is being unprofessional.
Yeah. Just unbelievable. Yeah. But way to
what do you
turn it
say
around.
to that? Like, I can't physically attend my workplace and be professional. Like, just screw you. Ugh.
I love because so if anybody hasn't is not aware of Bobby on Instagram, I highly recommend following him. VMitty. You will get just all of the most hilarious like adventures on dating apps and like jokes and things. He's so funny. Really, really highly recommend his Instagram. It's top tier entertainment. Hello, everyone. Future Michael here. We got a few submissions after we recorded the episode. We wanted to make sure to include those. So before we get to the very end, we're going to play them for you now.
Howdy, everyone. My name is Steven. I am a friend of Michael's, and I have been listening to the podcast ever since he told me about it. It's been a great resource, not only for me, but it has been a great source of information for me to regurgitate to other people. Most often at like Chub Chaser events, bear events, where I just hear people like talking about certain situations, let's say like being uncomfortable on a plane. And then I can share with them like the first no size policy that Southwest has, which I myself did not know about 2 years ago. So I know that there's plenty of other people who don't know about this. So it's just been really cool to just have a group of people who are within the Chub Chaser community sharing resources, their ideas, their experiences, the ways they've navigated situations, specifically like talking about how to navigate conversations with your healthcare provider as a big person. I think it's incredibly important as someone who works in the healthcare like field. It's difficult to find a healthcare provider who's able to listen to you, specifically if you're telling them like, I'm not someone who wants to lose weight. I just want to be healthy. We need to find that middle ground. And a lot of people aren't willing to listen to that. But it's nice to just have simplified ways to have these conversations and not have to like figure out everything yourself. Like being kind of like a resource pool where an entire community can kind of pull together information and experiences and just help to hopefully make life just a little bit easier. But yeah, I just want to say thank you guys. Keep up the good work. And you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Listening to the podcast has not just made me feel so much more confident in my own, confident in being in my own body and feeling beautiful in my own body, but also empowered to talk about that in a way that I hope inspires other people to maybe start rethinking some of their automatic ideas about beauty and body and weight. Not too long ago, I was hanging out with some friends and we were talking, I don't know how we got on this topic exactly. I think we were talking about boobs. And I made some comment about my boobs being, bigger than they used to be because now I'm chubbier. And this other girl was like, I'm sure the best of intentions. I'm sure she meant only wonderful things. She said, "Oh, you're not chubby. You're beautiful." And I, without missing a beat, I think thanks to the podcast, I said, I think the word you're looking for is and. I'm chubby and I'm beautiful. You can be both. They're not mutually exclusive. It's not a 4-letter word, but I'm not small. And I think before the podcast, I would have been so much more likely to say, "Oh, thank you so much," as if it was a compliment, or, "Oh, that's so sweet of you." But that ultimately would have made me just kind of feel worse because it's like, in order to feel beautiful, in order for someone to compliment me as beautiful, they have to erase my physical properties and pretend that I am physically different than I am. It's not a compliment. I mean, I don't have to explain to you guys why it's not a compliment, but you guys explain to me why that's not a compliment. And I feel so much better when I can say I'm chubby and I'm beautiful. I feel that's so much more of a genuine compliment than trying to pretend that I'm not one of those things because they couldn't possibly be. I couldn't possibly be both. And I hope that having those conversations, I want to feel like it's like a continuation of what you guys do. I mean, you guys reach so many people, and I hope that when I have those conversations, because that's not the first time I've said that, and that's why it came so easily for me to like own it and say it's not a 4-letter word. Like I make the same jokes every time because it's kind of disturbing how many times someone has tried to say something like that as a compliment. But I mean, I know you guys reach so many people with your podcast, and it is my hope that when I say things like that, I hope that maybe something clicks for just a couple of people. So with the podcast, I think that you guys are not just inspiring people to just reframe how they think, but you guys are creating a ripple effect. And that is something that is very, very, very powerful. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you to the people who sent in those last couple submissions. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to get back to our final one and the end of the episode. All right. Well, I think this is our last one of the day.
Ooh. No more.
Aren't we greedy?
All right. Let's hear from Dave.
Hi, my name is Dave, and I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. Here's what I love about this show and what I think about when I listen to it. Growing up as a baby gay in the early 90s, my mentors in the community were all guys who had been through the very worst days of the AIDS crisis. These were guys who knew what being quiet, being polite, and being accommodating to the discomfort of bigots got you, and they were not going back. They were loud, they took up space, and they were unapologetic about who they were. And that's how I learned to be as well. Unfortunately, it took me a lot longer to learn the same lesson about being fat, because when it came to being fat, I didn't have those same voices telling me to love myself. And that's what I love about this show. It's just refreshing to hear you guys talk, starting from a place that says that fat people deserve to exist, deserve to be treated with respect, and deserve to be cherished. And it gives me so much hope for the future because I know those chubby little baby gays coming up today have voices like yours telling them that they are perfect the way they are. So as much as I enjoy your discussions, the thing that always sticks out to me about the show is what a radical act of positivity, acceptance, and defiance it is in a world that very much does not want that sort of thing to exist. So anyways, thank you guys for everything. Congratulations on 200 episodes, and here's to 200 more.
Aw.
That's fantastic. That's ultimately, I think I've said this before, but that's the what convinced me to actually like kind of join the venture on the recording side, like contributing my voice and my identity to the show, was the idea of possibly reaching like a young questioning chaser who had no other resources and no other ways to find self-expression and self-acceptance. And so the idea that we could actually contribute to that experience was big. That was the whole point for me.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm just
is your heart sufficiently warm? I'm
warm.
feeling giddy.
It's soft and gooey. It's also like, I don't know. It looks like it's about to rain.
It's a cozy kind of day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making this possible by listening to us and sharing yourselves, because I mean, I think we had a similar kind of reflection when we did episode 100 back like 2 years ago. I mean,
a while ago.
Y'all are why we do this, and it's just nice to create this wonderful feedback loop of love.
This deafening feedback loop of love.
No,
it's louder and louder and louder.
It's
wonderful.
It's strange, doing the work. I think like Michael said earlier, like in a vacuum and just kind of not knowing where it's going, where it's landing, who's listening. Because we have some metrics of that, but like really it's kind of a toss up.
It goes out into the universe and we hope it's landing somewhere it's needed.
Yeah. And just like, I don't know, it's always delightful when we get to hear people know us. Like, oh, I know the Big Fat Gay Podcast. And like, especially when it's like just random. At Dan's friend's one woman show in the audience, he ended up talking to someone, like just a random lady.
I was sitting next to someone and we struck up a conversation and I said, I have a podcast. And she said, what is it called? And I said, oh, it's called the Big Fat Gay Podcast. And she's like, oh, I know that. My friend had me listen to an episode of that. I'm like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah, like we don't have Nielsen statistics. Like we don't really know how far reaching it is. We have like a vague idea, but podcast statistics are really wibbly wobbly. And so having those moments, having those like surprise moments are very candying. Yeah. But then being able to hear from listeners. And frankly, I mean, it's very nice for us to sit here and feel like praised and appreciated. But more importantly, other listeners being able to hear your experiences that you've submitted to us to be able to put out into the air. That's the magic. Like, that's the whole deal. That's the whole reason.
We are not for unicorns out in the world. We are for examples of you.
Yeah.
You know, we're just like
we have the microphones.
And don't you forget.
So thank you for spending time with us over the past 5 years. We appreciate you coming and lending us your ears. And I hope that you enjoy hearing the things that are weighing on our minds.
And to 240 more.
Because someone's got to make weight.
There's so many of them. So
Trevor, if we do have some wonderful listeners out there who would still like to send us some more letters or voice messages or any of those sorts of things for future episodes, where could they do that?
Oh God! It's like the treadmill fart. The treadmill started. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Big Fat Gay Pod. We're on Facebook as the Big Fat Gay Podcast. 5 stars there. 5 stars on your preferred podcast platform. And a review. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Big Fat Gay Pod. And see the articles we share for other episodes at bigfatgaypod.com. And the statement.
Good job, baby. Good job to kill that.
There was some tonal whiplash there for sure. The drums.
I don't know. We did it, gang. 200 episodes. They're gonna come in. I'm gonna do it. I said I was gonna make us all hold hands. We're gonna do it. Hold on.
Okay. Sorry. Hold on. We're creating a moment.
We're
here.
moving microphones so they can reach each other.
Okay. We're holding hands with you too. And watch out in a good way. Watch out.